Welcome to my house. Welcome to the Structure Talk podcast, a production of Structure Tech Home Inspections. My name is Reuben Saltzman. I'm your host, alongside building science geek Tessa Murry. We help home inspectors up their game through education, and we help homeowners to be better stewards of their houses. We've been keeping it real on this podcast since 2019, and we are also the #1 home inspection podcast in the world, according to my mom. Welcome back to the Structure Talk podcast. I'm Reuben Saltzman, your host, and today I have remembered to make a call out to our show sponsors immediately. Shout out to our sponsors, IEB, Inspector Empire Builder, fantastic group for home inspectors. It's all kinds of training on how to be a better business owner, and let's be honest, how to be a better human. I've learned so much about just relationships with other people through this group. If you want to learn more about IEB, check out the link in our show notes. That's my shout out to IEB. Love these guys. And now I would like to say hello to my co-host Tessa. Tess, how you
Reuben.
doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain. It's a good day. I mean, I can. We could use some snow here in Minnesota, but I've been harping on that for the last 6 weeks in a row now. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm doing pretty well.
It's been a very dry winter. Not a lot of snowmobiling for you, sadly. But
absolutely none, and none last year either. We can only hope. Yeah.
There could be worse things in the world, though, right?
Yeah. Most other people aren't complaining about the lack of snow. You know, it does make it does make transportation a lot easier. Let's be honest. It makes it easier to inspect houses. We get to inspect roofs. We've got 2 home inspectors in training in the company right now. And it's really nice to be able to teach them all about roofs for lots and lots of weeks this time of year. I mean, everything could be completely buried right now. So there's a lot of pros to it too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, should we introduce our guest today? I'm so excited. We have someone, I know we say this a lot, very special on today, but we do.
Charles,
We do have someone very special, and we were just discussing before we started recording. I don't think we've had Charles on our show before, so it is very long overdue.
So overdue. Yes. Oh my gosh, we got Charles Buell on the show, and
welcome, Charles.
Has got to be one of my oldest friends in the home inspection community outside of people here in Minnesota. I've known Charles for, I don't know, how long have we known of each other, Charles? Has it been 20 years yet? Probably close to that. Yeah. And I don't mean just internet friends. He and I have hung out a lot. I mean, when my family went on vacation out to Seattle, which is where Charles is located, we spent a couple days together. Charles took my whole family hiking in the mountains.
Oh, really?
He went on this underground city walking tour of downtown Seattle. He did all that with the family. And if I was just in Seattle recently teaching a class, we got breakfast together. We'll hang out, and that's besides any conferences we see each other at. So it's just always delightful to spend time with Charles. Just one of the sweetest guys and one of the most knowledgeable home inspectors you will ever meet. Such a nice guy.
I'm not sure how we even met. Did we meet on Active Rain, maybe?
It was Active Rain.
Yeah.
Yep. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's a blogging platform where he and I both blogged. We'd be Charles would blog basically every day. I'd be doing it about once a week, and we would just read each other's stuff and comment, and we got to chit-chatting online, and then it turned into phone calls. And man, we used to spend hours a week just talking on the phone. Remember that?
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting because all that blogging is still working for us.
It is.
I get calls all the time from people and comments that still come in on those posts. And I went in there, maybe a couple of years ago, and there were my blog had over 10 million hits.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I mean, it's unbelievable what an engine that was back in those days, and
Still
anybody that got a
is.
start with their blog on there.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's where I really kind of cut my teeth blogging and getting kind of a good outer shell, being a little bit impervious to criticism on that platform, because boy, you get a lot of it one way or the other.
It was a great place to get your notions corrected.
Yes, for sure.
I didn't realize you guys had such a sweet bromance. And you know what?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I thought before we started recording too, I was just thinking, Charles, you're such an inspiration to me, because even though you might be, quote, retired on paper, you are someone who is always learning and extremely curious. And I think you take a very lighthearted approach to some very kind of complicated things, and you make learning very interesting. You've done so many things throughout your career. You started out as you're kind of a designer, you're a builder, you were a general contractor for decades. You were trying all these new kind of cutting edge ways of building houses, which I find fascinating. That was way, beyond your time period, and, super insulated houses, and just all these things that are fascinating. But you continue to kind of dabble in things and learn and share your wisdom with other people. You do this blog, you teach online, you know what, I go on Facebook every once in a while, but every time I go on, I'm like, I'll see, questions or comments from other home inspectors or spray foam people, and there's Charles in the comment section telling everybody the facts about it.
Making a nuisance of myself, generally.
I appreciate who you are, Charles, and I appreciate your spirit and your energy and everything that you bring to this industry. But Reuben, I was going to say, I feel like you're similar in that way. Both you and Charles, you approach things with that same curiosity and can-do attitude, and you both blog, you share your information. You're just good people. So I feel like I've got kind of two Charleses on today.
I feel like Reuben and I both, when we hear something on the internet and our radar goes off, that sounds like bull crap, So we both head to our basements, or in his case, his garage, and we attempt to disprove, prove, or sort it out. And there's a standing joke in our house that if I'm doing electrical experiments in the basement, comments will come in, well, Julie must be away.
Yeah. She doesn't care for the lights dimming while you're doing your mad scientist work in the basement.
I'm sure it's the same thing for Anna when you're doing plumbing experiments, Reuben.
Right? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I know what you're thinking of. Well, Charles, if you would just kind of take us through what brought you to getting into the home inspection field. What led up to this? I mean, Tessa kind of alluded to some of that, but share your path with us.
Well, basically, it got to the point where I couldn't hammer nails anymore.
Okay.
I was a builder, active builder, not just a general contractor that brought in subs. I was doing the work. My business model was we would spend 3 months in design and making plans, and then we would do the project. So I had to have employees that liked that model, and what better person for that than sport climbers? They loved coming in and working for 3 months and then going climbing for 3 months. So it was a good relationship. Most of my employees were climbers in some respect. But when I couldn't really hammer nails anymore, or my shoulder from sport climbing wouldn't allow me to do that, and nobody could really figure out what was wrong with my shoulder, and on top of not having any insurance to get anything fixed if they did figure it out. So I morphed into home inspector. My brother-in-law was owned a housemaster franchise, and he said, "No, you ought to take this class and become a home inspector." So in the middle of all that, licensing was happening in our state, and so I got involved in working that out. He actually proposed the first licensing proposal with a senator here. And so I got to be part of working that. And of course, eventually that just went out the window. And it eventually happened, though. So I took he originally owned the course, the Carson Dunlap course, that and taught it privately to people. And then Bellingham Technical College took over the course from him. I think bought him out or whatever. But so now that course is taught at Bellingham, which I teach at. And,
Okay.
That's how it happened. And of course, I was inspecting for 18 years, and now I'm just doing consulting.
Okay. All right.
I have a legal business name, consulting, but it's fun. So I'm teaching and doing some consulting, and generally making a nuisance of myself on the internet as much as possible.
You're sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Well, there's no shortage of people coming on and saying idiotic things, and who's going to counter that? There's no police.
Yeah.
And it comes from there being so much bad information taught in general to home inspectors.
Yeah.
No matter what course you take, even my own school, the courses have bad information in them, and we're constantly attempt to fix all that, but it's entrenched in our industry.
Yeah, and
in our world, misinformation.
I used to help with that. Probably 10, maybe up to 7 or 8 years ago. I used to help with that a lot on the internet, and eventually, I just kind of gave up.
It's too exhausting.
but Charles is carrying the torch.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Charles. Yeah,
stubborn, and it is kind of entertaining. I'm retired, so I have time. I feel like I can be a voice. I feel like it's not appreciated much. Some days. I feel like there's a whole swath of the industry that would just as soon not know accurate and what is accurate information doesn't seem to be important as much as just making money. That makes sense.
Yep.
Oh, yes. And I don't think it's just home inspectors. I think that's just kind of where our culture and society is at these days. It's like fact checking, that is out the window. You watch a reel on TikTok and you think that's the truth. And so I appreciate people out there like you, Charles, that have just a wealth of knowledge and experience to back it up and do the research as well. So we need more people like you out there.
But I've seen.
So thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. I hope that it helps some people. But when I see the growth of absurd things like the flat Earth movement, and some of these other people that don't believe we ever went to the moon, or that there's no such thing as space outside, that somehow all of that really bothers me, that we're at a point where it's an accepted rationale that it's okay to think the Earth is flat. I mean, I don't get how that happens. I mean, it's
we
flat
don't believe that on our
locally.
podcast, and hopefully our listeners are with us on that too. We try to bring on, people like you, Charles, that have experience and have, wisdom and knowledge that we can share to hopefully help educate us all to be better at whatever we're doing. So, yeah. I think can we dive into, Charles? So we're doing this series, interviewing different home inspectors from around the country to hear about different types of housing stocks, the typical problems they run into, how climate affects your building science issues that are specific to your geographical location. And we last week we had on someone from kind of a mixed dry climate Kansas City area, and we Brian Stanley, and he kind of blew my circuits because one of the first things he said was that they don't really have any building code or regulations or requirements for licensing for like general contractors or home inspectors, and so it is the wild west where he is. And so it's just, it's been very fun and interesting, at least for me, to hear from, all these different people all over the country about how they handled their business and their challenges they faced. And so I kind of want to dive into that with you today and hear some of the things that, that you've learned over the years and challenges that you see with your housing stock out in the, in Seattle area, the West Coast, and specifically the marine climate. Right. Would you call yourself in the marine climate?
Yeah, Marine 4. Yeah.
Marine 4. Okay. Yeah. And for anyone listening too, we a year ago, we did the same series, and we had on Jim Caden from Oregon to represent the marine climate. So if you're curious, go back to that episode and listen. It was very fun and very interesting to hear his perspective on things too. But I'd love to hear it from your perspective, Charles. So where should we start today? What do you want to talk about with your housing stock and what's unique where you are?
Well, Marine 4 is clearly the biggest difference. We are impacted by that aspect of building science more than anywhere else in the country. And I don't know if Jim talked about that, but the whole notion of night sky radiational cooling, it affects us hugely because in your winter, for example, in Minneapolis, I would bet that your average daytime humidity when it's 20 degrees out is somewhere around 10% or maybe 20% relative humidity. On a wet day, it would be low. Am I correct? I know Syracuse was.
Oh yeah, very low. Well, I don't know what it is exactly, but I know it's low. Tessa, do you know what?
I don't have the specifics on that, but we do have humid days. We do get hot, humid summer days, but it's nothing like southern Florida.
But the difference in the maritime Northwest is that let's say it's 35 degrees out, it's going to be 90% humidity.
Mm.
And it's different than in Minnesota, where when it's 35, it's likely under 40% humidity.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with that is, and now you have absolute humidity and relative humidity are obviously the colder you get, the higher the humidity goes up. The absolute humidity is critical, but our air, you bring that cold air into a vented soffit and into the attic space, it's humid enough that it can condense on the roof sheathing. You probably don't see that much in Minnesota unless you've got air leakage from the interior.
Yeah.
Where it shows up here worst is in houses that are absolutely airtight. That you're under
so
1 ACH 50 and you got mold all over your sheathing.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that I have to kind of I have to think about that for a second because yes, with our housing stock in a cold, very cold climate, that warm, moist air is leaking out through the cracks in the building envelope
Right.
and, with stack effect and, positive pressure at the top of the building, that humid air is pushing up through those attic bypasses and then gets into that cold attic and condenses, like you said, on the
Right.
underside of the roof deck. So when we see frost in the wintertime, like you said, it's typically because of these leaks between the conditioned space and the unconditioned space. But what you're saying is when you see frost in the underside of roof decks, where you are usually it's the worst when that plane is sealed between the conditioned space and the unconditioned space, when the attic is sealed and it's coming from outdoor air that's got a lot of humidity that's then condensing on a cold
Yeah.
roof deck because of night sky radiation. Is that?
Yeah, and I don't want to. I should clarify that it's not that it's worse. It's just totally unexpected.
Okay.
You got a
Yeah.
house under 1 ACH50, it ain't leaking into the attic much. So why
Right.
is there still frost in the attic? Well, because what happens is the clear night sky, the coldest space is theoretically negative 400 plus degrees Fahrenheit. So really, really cold. And so the roof gives up its heat to space, and your roof surface temperature can drop well below freezing. So if your roof surface drops below freezing, it's certainly doing the same thing inside, or at least low enough for the dew point to happen on the interior sheathing. So then you get condensation on that sheathing.
Yeah, and Charles, I want to just stop on that for a minute to explain that to some of the listeners, because nights reverse. I don't know. It's not reverse radiation, but usually when we think of radiation, we think of the sun radiating heat towards the earth. But the idea that the earth radiates heat and that whole phenomenon is. I know the first time I learned about it a long time ago, sitting in a home inspector class, it kind of blew my mind. Just thinking about that differently.
Everything radiates.
Yeah.
You know, and normally we're talking about dealing with preventing sun radiation from coming into the house and heating the attic and melting the snow on the roof and causing ice dams and whatever. But it goes the other way. Sometimes the roof is the hottest thing in the environment, and what heat goes to cold. So if the roof is 30 degrees, it's going to give up its heat to space and suppress the temperature below 30. I've measured my roof at 40 degrees at the roof surface 25 degrees.
That is so interesting. Is this night sky radiation phenomenon something that happens everywhere, all over the world, all over the country? You just need a clear night sky. Is that the key?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And your attic is, let's say your attic is 25 degrees. You've got moist, warm air leaking into that. Why isn't the roof surface the same temperature above freezing? Why is the roof surface colder than, well, it's the night sky, and you have clear nights there, but super insulated, airtight house, you're not bringing moist air. It's not being pushed into the soffits, into the attic. It's pushing dry air in there. If anything, it's going to lower your humidity in the attic. Whereas we're raising the humidity.
Yeah, because your marine climate has so much moisture in the air.
And it's a really problematic thing that nobody really knows the exact answer. I have some theories as to how to prevent it. You can prevent it with hot roofs,
I was just going to say, do you move that thermal boundary up to the roof deck so it's not a vented space anymore? You bring that inside the conditioned space and make it an unvented roof.
That clearly works, but as Steve teaches us, you got to be damn careful with that. You got to get it right every time, 100% of the time, and that's why I'm still I still think a vented roof is safe, but maybe a quarter-inch of foam underneath the roof shingles instead of making an underlayment that's quarter-inch foam or something. Something to just break that. It doesn't take very much.
That's very interesting.
That's all yet to be determined. I don't know that there's a. And then add the proximity to water or a big swimming pool in the backyard or any of these things that are increasing the humidity level being pushed in the soffit vents. You've got lots of opportunity for that cold roof to condense out.
And while we're on this, just one other thing that helped me understand it a little bit more and just see it a little bit more here in the Twin Cities is with that night sky radiation. It's when you have those clear nights where we don't have any cloud cover. It means that your roof and the earth can see outer space. There's no protective layer. It will radiate its heat to outer space. And then when that happens, all of those surfaces get really cold. And then we get frost in the morning. That's what causes all that frost. And if you have a night where you've got this big, heavy cloud cover, you're probably not going to have frost the next morning. Or if you do, it's going to be very, very minor. But then if you look where your car is parked on the street, you notice there's never any frost there. And it's because the street can't see the sky. Your car is blocking it.
That's right.
That was the best way for me to kind of grasp this concept.
It's a great way to think about it. And you can go out in the summer when it's nighttime. You can hold your arms outstretched, and you can feel the hot concrete radiate to the underside of your arms. Will feel different temperature than the top side of your arms. Your arms will be giving up your heat to the night sky and taking on the heat from the coming off the concrete or asphalt. And Reuben, you snowmobiling. Do you feel more comfortable when you're at 35 degrees and it's cloudy or clear?
Oh, cloudy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. Same temperature, and yet cloudy. You won't be affected. You're insulated from the night sky then.
Yep.
It's so this topic is so interesting, and I know you've taught it before at different conferences, home inspector conferences, correct? This night sky radiation and the impact of that on durability and all these things for houses, and how to identify it as a home inspector and report on it. It's so interesting though, because hopefully somebody listening, this is new information for them, and they'll take that in, digest it, and implement it into their own practices for diagnosing issues and how they inspect. But I feel like the industry is still even struggling with the concept of how air leakage from the house can get into an attic space that's cold and cause frost in the attic. And as we were talking earlier about these online platforms of like still seeing a lot of inspectors posting pictures of dark staining in the attic and being like, oh, this is a problem with a roof leak or something.
What's the cure? Ventilation is always the cure, right?
Just add more ventilation.
Oh my goodness.
Those really tweak me. You want to get me going? I'm gonna get in there, and I'll always leave. Well, ventilation is really the cure. And one way I teach this is I ask the students to. Let's say you got too much moisture in the attic, so you're going to increase ventilation. So let's say we have a roof leak. It's actually dripping in the insulation. How much ventilation do we have to add to fix that?
Oh my goodness.
Let's stop bleeding
before we add more Band-Aids. Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's a physical bulk water leak or moisture from heated conditioned air leaking into the attic. It's still moisture in the space, and you're not going to fix it necessarily with more ventilation. I think you have to have a certain amount, and you want ventilation to deal with heat. Ventilation is for maintaining in attic temperature that's similar to ambient temperature. That's all. that it gets rid of incidental rat pee. That's okay, but it's not gonna deal with a bee vent that's coming apart or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, so talking about attics, what do you what kind of things do you see in an attic in the area where you're living in? Like, what types do you have HVAC located in the attic? What type of insulation do you see? Do you see a lot of hot roofs or not? Describe your typical attics and maybe some common issues you come across.
We don't see a lot of HVAC in attics, fortunately.
Good.
We generally that's elsewhere. I would rather see it in a crawl space than in an attic. On my planet, we don't really allow them at all in attics. I just think there's too much that can go wrong. You got ductwork that's problematic, not the unit itself that's problematic. So keep them out of the. And if it's a heating machine, aren't you improving the condition of heating a house if that unit is within the envelope that you're heating?
Yeah, you're just talking about the incidental heat loss around the machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not contribute that heat to the inside of the house?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just kind of good sense. But
yeah.
And them located in the garage is not too much different. I'd rather see it inside the conditioned space. All ductwork should be inside the conditioned space, in my humble opinion. But you go down south, like Gary Smith, my buddy down there. He's everything is in the attic. It's always in the attic. The water heater's in the attic. But you have areas that it happens more out of habit than anything else. Furnaces are tiny now. It's not like a behemoth octopus in the basement anymore. You're literally, they're a few cubic feet that you can stick in a closet somewhere now. They're not. But it's interesting. You reminded me of something that I was going to talk about. I've lost it now.
Hopefully it comes back to you here.
Yeah.
So what type of heating and cooling systems do you typically see up where you are?
I'd say mostly high efficiency gas furnaces, and mid efficiency if in anything that is like a duplex, condo, that's all going to be mini splits now. I see a lot of people replacing instead of putting gas furnaces in, they're putting in mini splits in their houses. We are in a climate here where they can be the only source anymore. You don't need any.
Really? Okay.
There used to be a time like you probably are still required to put in some kind of backup with a mini split, yes?
Like a secondary heating source?
Yeah, or a heat strip, electric strip in the ductwork. Some means of boosting the heat when it's the mini split gets
minus
too
20.
inefficient. Yeah, like minus 20.
Yeah,
they still will work at that temperature. And honestly, in a super insulated house, they're going to be more than adequate. Period. But trying to use a mini split in a 2x4 house built in 1940. That's where the challenge is. Yeah, they're going to work hard, and you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But in a house that's built to R40 sidewalls and R80 in the attic, mini split light bulbs work. Never mind mini splits. It's relative, and we don't really grasp that in the industry. I get arguing with people. They say, "Well, I can heat my house." With a candle. They said, well, literally, or are you just talking about you can just use your wood stove and you don't need the backup heat at all? Well, we're not talking about the same critters then. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a little sidetrack, if that's okay, because,
Yeah.
one of the things that you did before you became a home inspector, as I mentioned, you were like a general contractor for a while. And I find it very interesting because you kind of had this evolution. This is my perspective on listening to you talk, on finding ways to build very energy efficient homes at, in a very affordable way using just, common materials. And so can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you were doing back in I think it was the 70s, and how you built a house back then, and kind of what the price point was and how you built it, and how that compares to where we've come full circle like 50 years later on our quote energy efficient homes.
Yeah.
Well, you did, we did that thing together where it's two-hour videos, and those were great fun. I mean, it really challenged me because it got me a chance to actually look back and see the beginnings and take it through to as far as I went with it, and some new ideas I have as to how to even make them better now. It all started back in 1975 when I had a developer ask me, said, "Hey, I want to build a house for me in my development," and I said, "Yeah, maybe." And he showed me the plans, and it was just a regular run-of-the-mill 2x4 house, and I said, "No, thanks. I'm not going to build another dinosaur." And that was kind of my mindset at the time. I was thinking, well, we should at least be building with 2x6s. And of course, that quickly, I only built one house with 2x6s, and after that, there were several that were 2x8s, and then they went to 2x10 size. But the 2x10s were actually trusses, not solid wood. So that my thinking was always how to eliminate the thermal bridging that was so problematic. And eventually, the 2x6s really accomplished that. You could do the same thing almost at the same cost for 2x12. So if I was going to do it again, I probably would. But it depends where it is. And the thing that intrigued me is I always wanted to build in a way that any builder could do it. Whereas so many of the approaches today, you've got to be specialized. ICF requires a lot of specialized knowledge and techniques and tools to do, or SIPS panels, all of these. And the cost is so much higher. And I was building 2x10 walls for the same cost as a 2x4 house.
That's crazy.
I know, it's nuts. And people say you're full of crap. And I said, well, I can show you the numbers. And when you look at the materials list and you realize that, well, instead of a 2x4 wall, I've got a 2x10 wall that's 24 inches on center instead of 16 on center, and each stud is made out of one 2x4. So the materials are less. You've got more insulation, but you got no heating system, no cooling system. So all of these things start to offset each other.
So you actually, this is kind of interesting. You designed a truss, and you would use you'd cut up a 2x4 and build a truss out of it. And that would be the structure for your wall. And you wouldn't have the thermal bridging you'd have with a standard, 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, because you could get insulation through that truss. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Fascinating. And would you then, what would be the R value of your typical wall? And then what would be the R value you put in the attic? And what type of insulation would you use?
Yeah, I only ever used cellulose fiber. I never used any fiberglass. But it was R42 with the walls. And then the roof was R60 generally, or more, depends. So
Wow.
these were, I mean, that's what code is now, right? R6.
You were way ahead
you were
of your
50 years
time.
ahead. Yeah, I was going to say you're 50 years ahead of your time, Charles.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
did you ever do permanent wood foundations?
You know I did.
I thought you did. I had forgotten it. I mean, this is one of those things you surely told me over a decade ago, and it jogged my memory.
But that one first house I did, which was concrete blocks, every house after that was a wood foundation.
Yeah. Okay.
Charles, I think you're the only person I've ever listened to that might have changed my mind about permanent wood foundations.
Well, you got to do them right, but you have to do any foundation right, isn't that correct?
Yeah, but I'd say concrete block is a lot more forgiving than a permanent wood foundation. I mean, concrete tolerates moisture just fine. Wood, not so much.
Yeah, but how about freeze thaw cycles on? Have you seen concrete blocks? They just get trashed with frozen ground against them sometimes.
It can. What would you do with a permanent wood foundation to help make sure it stayed dry?
First of all, they should never get wet. If they get wet, you've already screwed up.
Right there. I mean, that's worth repeating. They should never get wet.
It should never get wet.
Yes. Once it gets wet, you have a failed water management system on your permanent wood foundation.
And honestly, no foundation should be allowed to get wet. But wood foundations, think of it as you're taking this heavily super insulated bubble, R42, R60, and you're carrying that R40 all the way down below frost to your floor level, really. So then you've got this slab that's a constant ground temperature, 50, 55 degrees. So you're never heating from more than ground level, 55 to 68, 70, whatever you want. Whereas normally in houses, we're heating from ambient, which in your case can be minus 30, right?
It gets very cold. Yeah. I don't remember the last time I saw negative 30, but it gets cold.
Yeah. Even minus 10 or 0.
Sure.
Heating 0 to 68 takes a lot more energy than heating from 50 to 68.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, but you can't do that with a 2x4 house because you're heating. You've got ground temperature working for and against you, as well as ambient working for or against you. So it's a system. It's not something you can just apply to any house, and very difficult to retro these ideas into existing houses. You're basically feeding the dinosaur forever.
Yep.
I feed the dinosaur I live in, but it's manageable here where it never goes below 35 or 40, hardly.
Yeah, and when you were doing these houses, that was in Syracuse, right?
Yeah, north of Syracuse, Oswego area mostly.
Okay. Yeah, you had some real winters you had to deal with there.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's considered Minneapolis our sister city with Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
They're just very similar.
So you built houses in the 1970s that had R60 attics, that had truss wall systems and permanent wood foundations. And how are they doing today? Have they withstood the test of time, Charles?
Yeah, you ever go back?
Yeah, I have gone back. I went and stayed in several of them 30 years after I built them.
Oh, wow.
Same owners there. And it was a delight. I had my IR camera. I never had an IR camera when I was a builder. I mean, I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I was building compared to what I know now.
Sure.
But they functioned and behaved themselves just because of my own stubbornness about refusing to just. For example, here's a good example. Because I was using cellulose with 10-inch walls and 24-inch centers, I knew that it was a good idea to glue all the drywall on. You know what that does to air sealing? We would just glue all our drywall on. Can you imagine how much that would improve our air sealing? So that, and then sealing all the way around sill plates to the subfloor. Where I used to run construction adhesive all around that connection, just to. In those days, I used to talk about I can't stop the air totally, so I'm going to torture the hell out of it. Well, that torturing process is what we do today, isn't it?
Yeah.
We try to seal our houses up so tight, and then and people say, well, it's going to be too tight, it's got to breathe. Well, nah, we want to control the breathing. We want to put systems in place that allow it to breathe when we want it to breathe and doesn't breathe when it doesn't need to. But a lot of people miss that, and I call it you go 10 steps towards energy efficiency, and then you back a couple steps up for health and safety and indoor air quality. There's no way around that. We have to do that. We're living, breathing human beings, and we're going to screw up our indoor environment just by breathing. So we have to deal with that.
Yep.
What kind of ventilation systems would you put in these homes then, Charles? Since they were so airtight and super insulated, did you have, air exchangers back then, or did you just use point source ventilation? Or
no,
what did you do?
ERVs. We had ERVs, and it became critical that we use them. Some didn't. I have one house that I built. They never did put an ERV in, and they really weren't known much back then. So some of it, one house I designed whenever you ran an exhaust fan, there was this underground ductwork that went into the crawl space. So it was passively ventilated that way. When they would run exhaust fans, it would pull air into the house. And that system, it worked okay. You couldn't do that here, though, because you'd be pulling all that moist air into your crawl space. So some of these systems, or you have to think about where they're being installed. Mississippi is going to be a different animal than Syracuse, and Syracuse is different than Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
Moving to Seattle really helped me in my understanding of building energy efficient houses, because I had to think differently. The principles are the same, but they apply differently. Like, didn't have to think about night sky radiational cooling in Syracuse. It just never came up, never presented as an issue.
Can you just dive into that briefly, or what are some other things that you learned, that were different and it changed your thinking being in Seattle versus East Coast?
It was kind of cool because you can put your water supply lines to your showers in outside walls. Who could have thought that would be a good idea?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of doing it there. You bought a tub with a left or right tub. You don't have to care about that here.
Sure.
If the tub came left hand and that meant the picture was going to be on the outside wall, you sent it back if you were in Syracuse. Right? You never thought about, if you cared. I mean, there were people that still did that, and they were stupid, and they had to deal with the freezing pipes forever afterwards. But you just didn't put freezing pipes that could freeze in an outside insulated wall.
Yeah. What would you say, are there current, with the current kind of housing stock or stuff that you see that's being built now or within the last 10 years or so, what are the kind of typical problems that you're seeing in those houses where you are?
In new construction?
Newer construction.
Newer construction problems. Just the typical mostly to do with faulty installation of materials, Headings, doesn't matter what it is. It seems like most people have a knack for getting them wrong.
Yeah.
Was that?
Oh, there, a little better. We kind of got a little quiet for a sec there, Charles.
Oh, wow. Huh. Yeah, the cladding systems, they can be installed wrong. I don't care whether they're brick or hardy or LP, you name it. They can all be installed so they function. But remember the early LP, it was a great siding, but if you didn't paint it every 10 years, you'd have problems. I had a great example of that. I use it in teaching where two houses right next to each other, sided by the same builder at the same time, and one painted it every 5 years and the other didn't paint it at all, and one was just falling off the house.
I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And the newer LP is a whole different animal. I mean, it's not. I put them both in buckets of water for months and not been able to hurt it. So I don't know. Yeah.
They wanted to make a product that you didn't have to paint and it would still function fine.
Yeah.
They didn't want to repeat what happened before. Yeah,
exactly. And I don't know. I think most of the failures of claddings like hardy and LP has to do with vapor drive than it does with water hitting it and evaporating and hitting it and evaporating. It is a reservoir cladding, so it does take on moisture and has to be able to give up moisture. But that's different than like in your climate where you're actually putting moisture right through the wall and coming right out through the cladding and freezing when it gets into the middle of the cladding. It's got to do damage to it.
Yeah, I think we do a pretty good job of not letting that moisture get there. I'd say the vast majority of the failures I see with products like James Hardy, fiber cement siding, vast majority of those problems are installation errors.
Sure.
Where it just soaks up a lot of water, bulk water on the outside of the house. That's most of the
in proximity to a flat surface or roof or something like that, right? Yeah,
exactly.
That's not rocket science.
No.
It's like the perpetual obsession with installing concrete stoops over the siding.
Sure.
It's common in your area, I assume, just as much as in mine.
Yep.
And so then it fails and you wonder why.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have the same issues out in Seattle we have here. It's just maybe lack of skilled labor, lack of craftsmanship, lack of, not following manufacturers' installation instructions, and just quality of work and installation being a big factor in some of these failures.
What I don't like seeing is home inspectors come down on a particular type of cladding, for example. Well, that's just bad cladding. It's not installed properly. If it's installed properly, it wouldn't have gotten your criticism.
Yeah.
And that's kind of...
To your point, Reuben lives in a stucco home built in the 90s.
True. Yes.
And is it behaving itself?
It is behaving itself. Yeah. I got it moisture tested before I bought it. And there was one spot that was a little questionable where someone should have installed kickout flashing and they didn't. And I had somebody at it and it left this big ugly scar. And I ended up having the whole front of my house painted with this special product. I ended up getting the manufacturer on to talk about this product. It's like this breathable paint and the house is functioning just fine.
Well, there's a good example of people they have a brick veneer and they put a waterproof paint on it and then it all goes to hell and they wonder why. You're in climate zone 6 there, aren't you?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, so do you install vapor barriers on the interior?
Yes. We have vapor barriers, on the warm side of the wall here because we're, a heating climate primarily.
Yeah. So,
However, I'm not saying that's a great idea because, well, we get a lot of days and weeks and even months of the year where it is very hot and humid, and we're running our ACs, our central AC system. So the vapor drive is coming the opposite direction. The moisture is coming from the outside, moving in. So now our vapor barriers on the inside is potentially, a source for condensation and mold. So
yeah, you just have to hope that seasonally it builds up and then dries the other way in the other season, correct? I mean,
hopefully,
that's the way of course, you can get to the point where with my houses where there are 42 sidewalls with cellulose and the attic is R60, you don't have an air conditioner, so that you don't have that drive the same way. Um,
hmm
None of my clients that have those houses with the 2x10 studs, they don't have any air conditioning. They don't. Just not necessary. Any cooling that you might need, you'd open up during the night, cool the house down, and close it up during the day. I mean, isn't that the way you live in a house? And doesn't that help with the ventilation and the air changes and the getting rid of all the cruddy air that's in the house?
Yeah, I love that.
I was going to say, for anybody that really wants to be, quote, green, that's the way to do it. Turn off your AC and open up your windows.
Well, exactly. There is no reason for houses to need air conditioning in the 21st century. They're just, I mean, we know how to do it. We know how to build houses to eliminate air conditioning, but you're not going to see it happen.
I would love it. I hate air conditioning. I mean, we use it to make ourselves comfortable, but I do not like having it on in the summertime.
I know what you mean. Like even in the car, right?
Yeah. It's like,
I'll tell you what.
I have to, but
I don't think I could survive in Florida without AC. So
yeah, it would be interesting to put my claim to a test in a climate like there. But how many houses do you know in Florida, in Key West, in Mississippi that are being built to the same standards that I'm talking about in Syracuse? They don't even want a 2x4 house is adequate down there. Well, the problem is that the difference in you're going from minus 20, say, to 68. So we think in terms of the amount of insulation we need to help us with that goal. But the difference between 68 and say 100 degrees in Texas isn't anywhere near as big a differential, right? So they think, well, we only need half as much insulation. But I argue that it's actually worse. To get your house from 100 degrees to 68 takes a lot of energy, just like it takes a lot of energy to get from 20 to 68.
Sure.
It's just
again, Charles, you're ahead of your time. Maybe in another 50 years, houses in Texas will have an R40 wall and an R60 attic. But
wouldn't it be fun
not
to
anytime
try
soon.
it? God. See, that's the other thing about my building career. I had the good fortune of having lots of clients that wanted to play with me. And I had the ideas and I had the dreams, and I had it. I don't know. I had the ability to talk people into this silliness.
Well, Charles, next time you feel like creating or having another class where maybe you teach about the types of houses you built and the pros and the cons of them and the affordability and the energy efficiency, let us know, because I think there'd be a lot of people interested in maybe hearing about how you did that. So let us know. Keep us tuned. But for now, we should probably wrap up this podcast because we've had you. I can't believe it. We've been talking for almost an hour already, and we try to keep our show to like 30, 45 minutes. So here we are. We could continue this for hours. I know, Charles, we could ask you a lot more questions, but thanks for coming on our show today. And if people want to get a hold of you, Charles, what's the best way to get a hold of you, and what's your website?
Well, my website is Charles Buell Consulting at, well, let's see, my website. God, it's just Charles Buell Consulting or Charles Buell Inspections. Either one will bring up that same website.
Yeah, it's I got it pulled up here. It's Buell. You don't give it out too often, obviously. It's BuellInspections.com.
Yeah.
Write that down, Charles. No. Yeah, Buell is Buell.
I just click on a button, Reuben.
I know, exactly. Well, Charles,
use
can't
the
thank you
good
enough
old
for your
Google
time.
machine. Yeah.
Good to finally get you on the podcast. And for the listeners, if you have any questions, you can email us. It's podcast@structuretech.com. And Charles, I think you got one more thing to share.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Tessa because she knows about the 2-hour videos we did together. I have them on YouTube for people that are really interested in them. I'm not making them public.
Could I link to those in the show notes?
Well, I don't. I'd have to change the permissions on them because
you would, but you just teased it.
I know, but I'm hoping that people that are really serious will contact me, and then I can give them the links.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's silly or not, but it's the way I've been doing it.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Then,
like I gave them to my kids, and they haven't even looked at them. So.
All right.
But I kind of built them as something for posterity or whatever. But,
well, if you've listened to this podcast and you've made it to the end, and you are curious, now you know the trick. Contact Charles Buell, send him an email, and he will send you a private link to view these videos of how he built houses and what he learned from back in the 70s.
Yeah, 4 hours of mind-numbing fun.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Charles. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see you guys.
Talk to you soon.
Good to see you too. Thanks, Charles.